Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hello from Las Vegas. How are you all? Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast. I'm your host Peter McCormack, and today I have an interview with Andrew Torba from Gab.com. But first, I have a message from my show sponsors. Are you interested in a crypto-backed loan? Well, BlockFi is the leading crypto to USD lender servicing customers worldwide, including 47 US states, and their interest rates start as low as 4.5%. BlockFi accepts Bitcoin, Ether, or Litecoin as collateral. Customers can be funded in USD or GUSD, which is Gemini's dollar-backed stablecoin, and you can go from application to funding in as little as 30 minutes. If you sign up at blockfi.com/whatbitcoindid, you can get $25 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans for under $10,000, or $50 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans over $10,000, and applying takes less than 2 minutes. Also, have you checked out Paxful yet? Just give yourself a minute, head over to their website and find out why they are a proper Bitcoin company offering the most comprehensive options available for buying Bitcoin. They accept bank transfers, debit and credit cards, PayPal, Western Union. We're talking about over 300 different payment options for buying Bitcoin, all listed on their website, so make sure you go and check it out. Also, they are a true peer-to-peer Bitcoin marketplace. They have a full-service escrow system, and they offer 24/7 customer support. These guys are awesome. Check them out at paxful.com, which is PAXFUL.com. And lastly, let's talk about my new sponsor, Bitrefill, another proper crypto business. Bitrefill is helping people live on crypto, allowing you to buy gift cards, top up your phone, and pay for your bills with Bitcoin, Dash, Dogecoin, Litecoin, and Ether. Over 130,000 people in over 170 countries have used them so far, so they are a company you can trust. I played with the website, I bought my son a PlayStation gift card using Bitcoin, and it could not have been easier. 4 quick steps. I selected the PlayStation network, I entered the amount, which was £20, sent my Bitcoin over, and the payment was detected immediately, and it only required one confirmation, so I received my serial code with instructions in under 30 seconds. It was slick, it was quick, it kind of blew my mind. So yeah, I'm now a customer at Bitrefill, and you should check them out. They offer Spotify, PlayStation Network, Steam, Hotels.com, ASOS, Virgin, loads. Definitely go and check them out. Everything's listed on their website. All you need to do is head over to bitrefill.com/WBD, which is BITREFILL.com/WBD. Make sure you use the /WBD so they know you came from my advert. And again, that's bitrefill.com/WBD. So on to my interview with Andrew, and this has proved a little controversial, a little divisive. Having shared out that this interview is coming, I've received a range of feedback from those who are like, screw Gab, stuff their alt-right agenda, it's full of racists and homophobes, to those who are like, no, this is a great interview, I'd definitely be checking out, any censorship is bad. It seems to be a divisive issue. It seems to be that people have different views on what the First Amendment means. I've seen lots of discussions around it. I guess censorship is a new rabbit hole for me to go down. It's far less of an issue in the UK, as we don't have something like the First Amendment, and we don't have it debated, and we don't seem to have such censorship issues. We don't have these huge platforms that are controlled by huge companies in the UK. Most of it's out of Silicon Valley. And we don't seem to have the deplatforming which is going on. I took the interview with Gab.com as they've been regularly promoting Bitcoin due to the restrictions placed on them for processing transactions. Yeah, I've got a Bitcoin podcast. I think this is an important topic. But I'm definitely in my early days of trying to understand and get my position together on censorship and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. I had a play on Gab.com. I think loads of the content on it's tasteless. There's lots of racist or homophobic material. But you know what? I also went out on Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, and you know what? There's lots of tasteless content there as well. And I think what I struggled with is, where do you draw the line? I think it's an interesting area, something worthy of debate. I think Andrew is a great person to get on. I'm definitely moving into more of an area where kind of censorship is bad, but I do struggle with where do you draw the line? And yeah, I expect lots of debate, lots of different opinions on this, but I do want to hear back from you. But if you do listen to the interview, please debate it. Please feedback to me, get in touch, email me, let me know what you think. I'm open to hearing a range of feedback because I definitely want to pursue this a bit more. So yeah, if you do have any kind of clear points and you want to get in touch, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. And listen, if you also want to support the show, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. I've got a section on my website that explains it all. Just head over to www.whatbitcoindid.com, click on the support section, you can find out more there. And I need to thank my Patreon top tier sponsors. Firstly, Elite Crypto Consulting, your personalized trading teacher. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast. Secondly, Vidyen, WordPress plugins for advertising and Manero mining reward sites. That is vidyen.com. Go and check those guys out. Thank you both of you for supporting the show. Okay, so onto the interview. As I said, if you've got any questions, you've got any feedback, please do reach out to me. I really do want to hear back from you on this one. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Hi there, Andrew. Thank you for coming on the show. So you obviously know my show is primarily a Bitcoin show, and every now and again I will have an interview which is not with somebody in the traditional Bitcoin community, not a developer, not maybe an investor, but somebody who's come from kind of out of nowhere. And what's happened with Gab.com is that I've seen so many posts starting to appear on Twitter and started to see all this stuff about censorship. And so I kind of thought, right, I think I need to talk to these guys. And I've done a bunch of research, and I think it's going to be one of these ones where during the research and during the interview, I'm going to learn something and my opinion's going to change. So I think a really good start would be, can you give me your background and then give me the background to Gab and how this all comes together?
I come from a small town in Pennsylvania. I now live rurally in Pennsylvania. So being in San Francisco was a bit of a culture shock. And as a conservative, as a Christian, I felt very out of place being there and felt that I had to keep my political views, my religious views, my opinions really to myself. So I was in this mode of self-censorship for a few years as I was building that first company. The ad tech company, we were working with Facebook, with Twitter, with Google on their ads products. So I had a lot of friends, have a lot of close relationships with folks that work at Facebook, Twitter, and Google. During the 2015 presidential election cycle, as things started to heat up, I had noticed that there was a lot of censorship going on Reddit, on Twitter, on Facebook, etc. I just witnessed this personally because I was an active member of the Donald Reddit subreddit community, witnessed a lot of shady stuff going on there from Reddit, was an active Twitter user, witnessed a lot of shady stuff going on there with manipulation in terms of trending topics and people being shadow banned and weird things going on that really had never happened before up until this point, because these platforms had always preached free expression and, I'm all about free speech. At one point, Twitter called themselves the free speech wing of the free speech party. The media praised Twitter during the Arab Spring. In fact, they called the Arab Spring the Twitter revolution, right? But now we start to see these populist movements going on around the world, first with Brexit and then with Donald Trump, and all across Europe and in Brazil with Jair Bolsonaro, et cetera, et cetera. And these big tech corporations and the media are freaking out, and they no longer support freedom of expression. They no longer support the free flow of information. So my tipping point was when a whistleblower from Facebook's trending topics product came forward and said, we're actively suppressing conservative news, conservative sources, conservative ideas, news, trending topics product that is used by over 1 billion people every month and is what people see as news. I said, someone's got to do something, right? There's no real alternative. Consumers have the illusion of choice. Most people don't realize that Facebook owns Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook groups and Messenger, and all those top apps in the App Store are all owned by one company. So there's not really a choice outside of these Silicon Valley companies in their ideological echo chamber for community building, right, or a social networking atmosphere, or social news. So that was the premise of how Gab got started, and we launched into beta in August of 2016. So I guess that's a little background on me and how Gab got started and what inspired me to start Gab.
And why do you think this censorship of conservative opinion is happening?
Well, anytime you have censorship, it's when better ideas are winning in the free marketplace of ideas, right? So if your ideas are garbage, which a lot of the globalist and progressive ideas are, and the winning ideas are starting to overtake your poor ideas, and people aren't eating the dog food that they're being spoon-fed from the propaganda machine, on the TV or in mainstream media outlets or mainstream blogs, they have no choice but to censor the prevailing dominant ideas that are winning in that free marketplace of ideas. So I think that is a big part of it, is they don't want to lose their control. They see that people are empowering themselves. They have access to knowledge knowledge, they have access to information in a way that has never been possible in human history. And I think a lot of the people in power are very threatened by that because they can no longer control the narratives. They can no longer spoon feed the public narratives that they're just, supposed to accept as reality on face value. We have independent journalists. Anybody with a mobile phone in their hand becomes a journalist that is on the scene, actually reporting what is going on, not reporting a particular narrative or a particular agenda, but objectively, here's what's happening. And I think they're really threatened by that. So I think that's a big part of why this is happening right now.
Okay, so let's imagine I don't know a lot, because I don't. We don't have such a debate over free speech in the UK. It definitely seems to be something that I read about more in relation to the US. I'm not sure if that's because there's more like extreme views or it's a different kind of media, but it's less of an issue here, and possibly also because we don't have something like the First Amendment that people stand up for and feel that's so important. So just because we will have a range of people listening to this show, can you just explain what the First Amendment is, why it's so important in the US?
Sure. The First Amendment is, the single most important fundamental human right on the planet, and it's a concept, but it's also a document. It's also law in the United States. It is the reason that I'm able to do what I'm able to do. It's the reason that so many that have come before me are able to do what they're able to do. And it's not only about speech, it's about expression, it's about religious liberty, it's about the freedom of the press, right? So there's a lot in the First Amendment. It's not just simply about the freedom of speech, but primarily the First Amendment is to protect against government tyranny, against different types of expression. And the First Amendment is not, there to protect popular speech. It's specifically there to protect unpopular speech, speech that most people maybe don't agree with, at a certain point in time. But over time, because we have the First Amendment, in the United States of America, we've been able to do things like free the slaves, like civil rights. All these social movements are only possible because of the First Amendment, because if it wasn't there, then the government could have quashed out any of those movements, depending on who was in power, right? So that's why it's so fundamentally important, is that minority opinions today, could become the dominant opinion within a few years. As we've seen in the United States with the legalization of gay marriage, as an example. I mean, you go back 20 years, and that would have been unthinkable. But because we have the First Amendment, this social movement was able to rise up. And, we saw that happen within a very short time frame. This massive social change in our country happened in a very short amount of time. And I think the First Amendment is really what drives a lot of that. So the other thing I think I would note is that the First Amendment is different than free speech as a concept, right? Because, the First Amendment protects against government intervention or governments coming after individuals or corporations or organizations for expressing themselves. But I think free speech as a concept, it's really a cultural thing. It's a societal thing. It doesn't it's related to the First Amendment, obviously, but it is also a separate concept in and of itself where, it's reliant on society and on culture to uphold the values and the principles of free speech of, hey, I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, but I will fight to the death to have your ability to be able to express that so that we can talk about it. Because, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions that people aren't going to agree with. But if they harbor that stuff inside, if they can't, or if they're told, by these big mega corporations that you're not allowed to talk about this subject, you're not allowed to share this news link, right? If they can't express themselves through words or through ideas or through art or through memes, well, then the only other option that they have is expressing themselves through violence. So I'd much rather see, opinions written down or, controversial or offensive stuff that I don't have to look at it. I can, choose to block somebody or mute somebody or, unfollow them, or I have the individual liberty, the user choice to make those adult decisions without having a corporation make those decisions for me. So I think that, that's a fundamental thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about free speech and the First Amendment is like they're related, but they're also two separate concepts.
But within that, there's no place for taste, right? Taste is irrelevant.
Yeah, it is. It is because these concepts like hate speech or even harassment or all this stuff, like it's all subjective because something could be deemed hateful in your eyes, but in my eyes, it's a joke or it's someone being an idiot. You know what I mean? It's a very subjective concept. So I don't think that two or three or at max 5 corporations in Silicon Valley get to decide what the entire internet is allowed to talk about, is allowed to say, links that they're allowed to share, or who's allowed to have a platform and who isn't when they're not breaking the law. I think it's absurd.
So interestingly, obviously, in preparation, I signed up for Gab, and I had a look around, and certainly there are things that I found a bit tasteless. There are, there's racism, there's homophobic jokes. And at first I was thinking, well, what is the point of this? But to try and be fair, then I started doing a little bit of a search on, say, Twitter and Reddit, and I found similar stuff. So what is the difference between, say, yourself and the likes of Reddit and Twitter? Is it that you have a completely open policy, whereas the policy on sites like Reddit and Twitter appears to be grey?
Right. So here's the thing. We have always welcomed everybody. We're not a conservative only or right wing only site. I think majority of our community today, although this is changing rapidly, is certainly people on the right of center, libertarian. But when you ask yourself why that is, it's because all these people are being put in timeout or banned, or their favorite creators are being suspended off of all these other platforms, whereas the left isn't experiencing that, right? So it makes sense that they would seek out a platform where they can express themselves without fear of being banned or losing 10 years worth of content, for example. I think the difference between us and Facebook and these other guys is they have these very subjective, ambiguous terms of service that are kind of always changing, and they enforce them unequally. So they'll enforce them against people on the right, but not people on the left, especially not journalists, especially not celebrities. And that's ridiculous, right? So I think when we enforce our guidelines, which, by the way, Gab is not an anarchist site, like we have user guidelines that we used the First Amendment and rulings on the First Amendment, Supreme Court rulings on the First Amendment to draft our terms of service and our user guidelines. And really, they look pretty similar to Twitter's, circa 2007 to around 2015, when they decided to start making all of these changes. Common sense stuff. Don't break the law. Don't post child porn. Don't spam, right? Don't dox somebody. No threats of violence, right? Like common sense stuff that everybody that you would show these to is like, okay, I can agree to these simple set of rules. And the difference between us and Twitter and Reddit and all these other guys is we enforce them equally. We don't care if it's a big celebrity on the site. We don't care if it's a politician. We don't care if it's a journalist. We don't care if it's a brand new user, a user that's been on for years. If you're breaking our guidelines, we're going to take action. And when you set that line in the sand and when you enforce things equally, people tend to respect and follow those rules in our experience over the past 3 years.
Right. Okay. So is there potentially, I'm trying to think how to word this. I guess do you have the ability there for yourself to take legal action against those who've essentially, because you've experienced your own form of censorship, like financial censorship, right?
We've experienced, I think we're one of the most censored startups on the planet. So I'll just go through the ringer here of what we've been through over the past 3 years. We've been banned from both app stores for quote unquote hate speech, quote unquote objectionable content. And there have been third-party studies by academic groups and PhDs who actually looked at every single post ever made on our website. And what they found is that 95% of content on our website does not contain any hate, does not contain any hate speech, et cetera, in comparison to something like 4chan, which it has around 10% of hate content, or something like Twitter, which allegedly in the studies they claim had, I think, 2.6 or something like this. I don't know where their sample size came from, but regardless, I think that's the fundamental thing is that, we're not a hate site, right? Are there hateful people on the site? Sure, it's the internet. There's hateful people all over the internet, as you experience. You go looking for hate on Twitter, on Reddit, on Facebook, you're gonna find it, right? So I think why is Gab removed from both app stores? We've been removed from hosting providers. We've been banned from PayPal, from Stripe, from Coinbase, from BitPay, from Cash App. At every level of internet infrastructure, from payments to hosting to our domain registrar, we got kicked off of GoDaddy. Every single level, app stores, we've experienced no platforming and censorship unlike ever before. Why? Because we have a terms of service that looks identical to Twitter's up until about 2015. We enforce it equally, and 95% of our site is not hateful. That's why we've been systematically, kicked off the internet. We were actually, at one point, we were completely off the internet because our hosting provider gave us 24 hours to find a new host. And we were down for about 6 days because, I don't know, most people maybe don't know this, but finding a new host and switching all of your code base over to a new host, especially for a site and a code base as big as ours, is a monumental task. So, our guys had to work around the clock for 6 days, and we were off the internet for 6 days because of that.
It sounds kind of coordinated. And the one that stands out to us, one that hit the press majorly in the UK was obviously Alex Jones. And what happened to him, like, I'm not a fan of Alex Jones, but what happened to him felt coordinated. It was kind of like everything at once. Do you have a belief that there is like some kind of coordination between these companies?
Without a doubt in my mind. Yeah, absolutely. First of all, they're all in, just in terms of location, they're all in the same place, right? Like, they're all in the Bay Area, they're all in San Francisco. They all know each other. They all communicate. And what it is you look at the coordination even behind our no platforming, right? So we were banned within, I think it was 48 hours. We lost our host, we lost PayPal, we lost Stripe, we lost a ton of third-party providers, third-party services. We lost our blog. I mean, when it happens within 48 hours of each other, you have to ask yourself what's going on. And, you make a great point about Alex Jones. You don't have to agree with everything he says. You don't have to like him. You could actually despise him. But when you see what happened to him, he was unpersoned off the internet. And if they can do it to him, someone who's been on the internet for, I think, 20 years, like since the start of the internet, right? He lost over 30,000 videos. Every tweet he ever made was gone. Every post on Facebook he ever made was gone. Access to his website via Google search was gone. So, you have someone who has a massive platform, a massive footprint on the internet. And because Silicon Valley says so, this person no longer exists as far as the internet knows. That is horrifying. And if they can do it to someone as big as Alex Jones, as prevalent as Alex Jones, they can do it to anybody, right? Any individual, any corporation, any organization they want. And that's horrifying.
Are there any hate speech laws in the US that prevent certain types of speech?
Absolutely not. No. The US Supreme Court ruled unanimously in 2017 that hate speech is 100% protected by the First Amendment.
So, because that's one of the things I was thinking about. Like, some of the content is quite tasteless and some of it comes across as quite hateful. I'm pretty sure out here in the UK, hate speech is illegal. So that's probably one of the key differences. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And in Germany, in Canada, yes, all across the world, there are hate speech laws. Absolutely. And the problem with that is that, today they're being used against one particular group of people. Tomorrow it could be used against another particular group of people because that term is completely subjective, right? You look at Twitter and you see these journalists and these celebrities, tweeting all this hate about white people or about men or about Christians. Those are all allowed, right? Like, hate speech about any of those people is allowed, or even minorities who have become conservative or Trump supporters. You're allowed to be hateful towards these people. And I think the double standard and the hypocrisy is really what drives me insane because, if you're going to enforce hate speech rules or hate speech laws, well, then do so equally, right? You're going to have to go after the people that are being hateful towards whites or towards Christians or towards men, just like you'll go after, people who are being hateful towards other minority groups.
Does that affect how you run the platform, though, say, in the UK? If there are hate speech laws, do you have to block content or you just carry on anyway?
Nope, absolutely not. And actually, that's one of our selling points as well, is because we're a U.S. company, a U.S. corporation. We do not have offices in the UK. We do not have offices in Germany, in Brazil, in Canada, whereas Facebook, Twitter, all these guys, they do. So when they get data requests, for someone who's, committed hate speech on the internet, these other corporations immediately hand over that user data, whereas we do not. We reject, and we regularly get requests for users that are being quote unquote hateful. And, we have foreign governments try to get their user data, their IP, et cetera, and we reject these. And that's actually one of our selling points is like, we're going to protect you not only with the First Amendment as a U.S. corporation, but also privacy and data protection laws that we have here in the United States as well. And our goal is to extend those rights to everybody around the world. And, I think it won't be long before we see one of these countries ban Gab. I would not be surprised if, we see some Chinese style censorship where Germany blocks Gab's URL, and anybody in Germany is going to have to use a VPN to access Gab. And we have plenty of people that are on Gab from Germany. I could see the UK potentially doing the same thing, maybe even Canada. And that's a scary thing. That's a scary world to live in, where governments can decide what social networks you can use and what you can't. I think that's wild, but I think we're not too far off. I think that's the next level of no platforming that Gab will likely experience going forward.
So it's interesting you pick Germany as like the most likely one, because they obviously have a clear, I'm going to say problem with far right, but you're making me, I don't know, do you see the far right as a problem?
No, I see the far right as a reaction to an even bigger problem of globalization, of forced migration, of forced mixing of cultures that do not agree with one another on a very fundamental level. I see it as a reactionary movement. Now, obviously, I would speak against any form of violence. I think people should duke it out in the free marketplace of ideas, and that's partly why I fight so hard and I'm working so hard to build Gab, because I would much rather live in a world where we're on the internet, behind the keyboard, duking it out over ideas with words, than duking it out in the streets with violence. And again, I think if you tell people that they can't express themselves through words on the internet, the next logical step for them is to go to the streets and to get violent. We see this happening in France with the Yellow Vest movement. People are sick and tired of it. They've voiced their opinion against their governments on the internet and in different forms of protest, etc. But now they've reached a breaking point where they've just had enough. So they're taking to the streets. And I think we're going to see that a lot. So I don't think necessarily the far right. I don't think it's as big as the media makes it out to be. I think the far left is a dangerous thing, because the far left is they're proponents of communism, and communism. When you compare communism and fascism, communism has killed far more people, hundreds of millions of people, right? And has starved and genocided, endless amounts of people throughout the past 100 years. So I think that is a more deadly philosophical point of view. If you want to, talk about far left versus far right, I would take the far right over the far left any day, because at least the far right, I think they're grounded in a little bit more rational thinking and maybe less likely to get violent if they can express themselves through words and through other forms of communication versus violence. Although, of course, there are those who do get violent, and I would absolutely condemn and disavow those people. Violence is not the answer. Fight in the free marketplace of ideas with your ideas versus fighting with words or with violence. You're not going to win anybody over doing that. And, there are people on both the far left and the far right that get violent. And I would speak against both of them. So,
sorry, you said like the liberals, the far left, are proponents of communism. Are you really more talking about social? Because there's a difference between socialism and communism, right?
It's both. They'll be proponents of both.
Because obviously, I follow the media, and I follow, and there were times I was a very liberal person, and actually, since I've got into Bitcoin, I've come to understand the problems with kind of socialist policies, etc., and how they can be unfair. I'll be honest, I'm completely confused politically these days. I actually don't know where I am, because there are times where I was like, I used to have socialist ideals. I loved the NHS in the UK. And then I had a conversation with somebody you're aware of, who you've quoted in one of your emails, Beautyon. And he kind of explained to me the problem with the NHS. So I'm completely confused these days, but I'm yet to see a left-wing party be a proponent of communism.
Well, it's it's proponents of communism, right? So it's Marxism. It's separating people into identity groups to break down the fabric of society. It's one of those things where both communism and socialism both look great on paper, right? It's like, oh, we want to help everybody. We want people that are working harder or making more to share the wealth, etc. Like it looks like this utopian dream when you look at it on paper, but in practice and in reality, it doesn't work at all, because that's not how human beings think or how they feel about certain social problems. I think a lot of people are in your position where they're very politically confused these days. For me, it's pretty simple. I'm a classical liberal, right? So I believe in the individual. I believe in not judging people based on their collective identity group. I believe on treating them as a direct individual, and hearing what they have to say and what they have to believe in, and empowering them as much as possible. And I think that's one thing that Bitcoin does, is it raises up and empowers the individual unlike ever before in history. So individual liberty, freedom of expression, free speech, all of those things kind of go together. So I think the left used to be, at least in the United States of America, used to be more classically liberal, but they've kind of shifted more far left into socialism, into Marxism, into even communism on the extreme, which is it's not good. And I think that, again, I'd rather have these discussions about communism and socialism versus nationalism versus populism, which is more on the right, than duking it out in the streets with one another with these Antifa thugs that we see in the United States, or even on the super far right, some of the more violent guys on that side of things. I think both are wrong, and again, I'd rather see people talk it out and express themselves online without having these big corporations decide who can participate and who can't. I think that's absurd.
Yeah, I think I saw a quote from you or read an interview in prep for this that you said it's much safer that these ideas are open and discussed than censored. And I kind of got the feeling you were saying if they're censored, these people are going to be more angry. They're going to be having their discussions in kind of private without challenge, right? But at least if it's public, it can be challenged, it can be debated. Is that correct?
Right, exactly. They can be challenged, first of all. And, if they're planning violence or if they're giving signs that they're going to become violent, well, by allowing them to express themselves publicly on the public surface web, not on the dark web, or not in, some corner bar where they have, small meetups and talk in person, law enforcement is able to keep an eye on these people and monitor them and hopefully prevent bad things from happening. And that happens every day. And people don't know it because the bad things don't end up happening, right? So I think it's actually a good thing to have all forms of legal expression on the surface, on the top level of the internet, where those ideas can be challenged. Those ideas can be tracked if they're going down the path of violence or terror, etc. There's a lot of inherent good to more speech. I think more speech is always the answer to bad speech or to hateful speech, because you have to shine a light on that darkness in order for it to break and hopefully bring people to the light, and hopefully maybe convince them, or at least get them to second guess their ideas or their opinions that may be hateful or that may be harmful or maybe violent. I think it's more speech is always going to be the answer. Fundamentally, that's my position.
Next up, I talk to Andrew more about censorship and the challenges that Gab.com faces, but before that, I have a message from my show sponsors. So, you all know about BlockFi, right? But have you really checked them out? Have you followed them on Twitter? Have you signed up to their newsletter? If you aren't following them, then you're missing out on the future of cryptocurrencies and banking. And they've also extended their sponsorship with the podcast, which is super cool. Thank you. And we've got some amazing announcements coming from them soon, so keep an eye out for that. And so much has happened for BlockFi in the time they've been sponsoring the podcast. Zach Prince, their CEO, came on the show. That was episode 51. If you've never listened to that, you definitely should. He talks about the future of banking and crypto. It's super interesting. They raised that additional $4 million in funding, which they're going to use to expand their team, launch exciting new products, including a crypto savings account which earns interest and crypto-backed credit cards. They've added support for Litecoin as collateral and stablecoins as a funding option, and so much other stuff. So if you are interested in a crypto-backed loan, well, BlockFi is the leading crypto to USD lender servicing customers worldwide, including 47 US states, and their interest rates start as low as 4.5%. If you sign up at blockfi.com/whatbitcoindid, you can get $25 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans for under $10,000 or $50 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans over $10,000. And applying takes less than 2 minutes. Also, I want to talk about my friends over at Honeyminer. They were one of the very first advertisers I had on the show, and they're back, and they have a huge announcement. They now support Linux. So have you ever wanted to get into crypto mining but have no idea how? Well, Honeyminer is the easiest way to get started with their one-click install, earning Bitcoin straight to your computer. They support Windows and Linux, with Macs coming soon, but let's talk about Linux, as this has just come to the market. They've just announced this. Compatible with Ubuntu 16.04, Ubuntu 18.04, and CentOS 7, Honeyminer Max pays out market value plus 10%. As with all mining, payout may fluctuate with each payout period of 2 hours, but should average out at 10% greater than open market earnings. Does that sound cool to you? Are you interested? Well, if you want to start mining with Honeyminer, then head over to honeyminer.com/labs. That is Honeyminer, HONEYMINER.com/labs.
All right, well, let's talk about the difficulties you've had with Gab, because I went through the Wikipedia and it's quite an intense list, and it just feels like everyone has. It's rather than ask who has blocked you, who hasn't. It feels like everyone has got in the way of what you've tried to achieve. So let's work through that. So your launch was, what was it, August 16?
Yes.
So how much of a clean run did you have before you started to get attacked by and censored by other companies?
Well, we were actually in private invite-only beta for about a year. So it wasn't a public-facing website, and not anybody can join. You actually had to be invited. So we got about a year of solid building and building up our community, etc., without any no platforming. Now, of course, we weren't on app stores at this time anyway. We started web first because we specifically did not want to be under the thumb of Apple and Google by starting with an app first, which proved to be a very visionary strategy and a winning strategy, because inevitably we did get banned from both app stores. After Charlottesville is really when a lot of things started to escalate in terms of no platforming, and not just for us, but for a lot of other people, especially on the right. That was August of 2017. Things started to escalate. Now, we had been rejected from the App Store, I think 9 or 10 times before this. So we never actually got into the App Store. We were just, stopped at the door, basically. They wouldn't even acknowledge. And 9 or 10 times, and months and months and months of trying to get approved, and trying to do different things to appease Apple with the app, and they wouldn't let us in. And then shortly after Charlottesville, we got banned from the Google Play Store. We started having problems with our domain registrar. We had to find a new domain registrar within 48 hours. They were demanding that we censor a specific post, which wasn't against the law. It wasn't anything illegal. It was an offensive meme. It was a controversial meme, but it wasn't against the law. It wasn't against our guidelines. So we didn't want to remove it. Then I think after that, really a lot of the coordinated no platforming started after the Pittsburgh shooting in October. So within a matter of hours, we started getting kicked off of every possible platform, payment processors, hosting, etc. All within about 48 to 72 hours of one another. It was very, very coordinated. And again, we were off the internet for about 6 days. So, after that, we got back online. We found a new host. We found a domain registrar, epic.com, EPIK.com, that was willing to take our domain and stand by and support free speech. That's really what we had to do, is seek out partners who shared our values and shared our principles, and was willing to take the heat, because all of our partners have taken heat from the media, from activists, from the online outrage mob. And it took a lot of guts for some of our partners in the hosting and the domain registrar level, et cetera, to stand up and say, no, we're going to host these guys. They deserve to be on the internet. Free speech deserves to be on the internet. And no, we don't agree with everything that's on the site, but we agree that they deserve a platform and they deserve to be online. So that was a part of the journey. And then the final part of the puzzle was payments. And, we have gone through probably a dozen different payment processors and 30 some plus odd banks trying to get a new payment processor. And thus far, we've been unable to do so. It's been months. So eventually I got to the point, and it's a very long process. A lot of people don't realize this, that, you have to go through an underwriting process. It's almost like getting approved for a mortgage or for a loan, where they have to dive into all of your financials and do credit checks. And, you have to send them a ton of information, and it takes weeks for each application. So, we spent like 2 months doing this, and I was like, enough's enough, right? We have Bitcoin. We have free speech money. That's the answer. And we had been accepting Bitcoin since inception, but, we were going through Coinbase or through BitPay, and we got banned from both of those. So we had to, spin up our own BTC Pay server node and basically become our own crypto payment processor. And it worked really well, and people are using it. And, we got the Bitcoin community really excited because, we're introducing Bitcoin to, almost 900,000 users, many of whom maybe have never heard of Bitcoin, many of whom certainly have never purchased Bitcoin. They're now setting up their first wallet and setting up on exchanges and buying their first Bitcoin just to support Gab, which is really an incredible thing for adoption. And I think the biggest problem that Bitcoin so far has had is from a marketing perspective, because everybody wants to talk about all these technical terms like blockchain and decentralization and sound money. And, you talk to any normal person who is not in crypto Twitter or not in, crypto communities on the internet, in this filter bubble, and they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. And frankly, they're not going to be interested, right? You have to brand it in a way that makes sense to people and that they get instantly, and that makes them want to learn more. If you tell grandma or your mom that Bitcoin is free speech money, and just like if you're going to Europe, you need to exchange US dollars for euros, in order to make transactions. Well, you need to exchange US dollars for Bitcoin in order to make transactions with Gab or with your favorite content creator who is now banned from Patreon or from PayPal or etc. You frame it in that way, and it makes much more sense. I think the other problem that a lot of normal everyday people have had is they don't realize that they don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. So they see the price and it's like, oh my goodness, it's $4,000. Like, I can't afford that. Well, you have to explain to them, like, you could buy $5 worth of Bitcoin, right? So there's these hurdles. But I think that we're in a great position to educate a lot of people on the importance, the most important value that Bitcoin has outside of the store of value aspect, outside of the not answering to any corporation or government or centralized entity. The most important thing is, to me, that the price doesn't matter. The block size doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters as long as I can process payments without permission and without being censored. Then Bitcoin is going to be our choice, and that's how that led to that decision.
Great, man. So listen, we're going to get into that because obviously it's a Bitcoin show, and I wanted to talk to you about that as well. Also, what's quite interesting, listen to you talk about it. You're definitely not somebody who's just discovered Bitcoin, right? You're using a lot of the language that is used. So you have a background.
Yeah, since about 2012.
Right. So, but why only Bitcoin on the website? Like, there's lots of cryptocurrencies. There's lots of different ways people might want to pay with you, but you're only Bitcoin. Why is that?
Bitcoin is the king. It has been the king for 10 years. It's going to continue to be the king. It is the only cryptocurrency that offers censorship-resistant payment processing that is proven. I don't dabble. I have dabbled in the past with scam coins, is I think a better brand than shit coins, which is what a lot of crypto Twitter and the community likes to call them. But I think a lot of these coins have these cults of personalities around specific individuals trying to take the helm and trying to take control over Bitcoin or over cryptocurrency in general. And I think that's bullshit. That is not the point of Bitcoin. That's not what Satoshi set out to do, is have these little factions of centralized people and cult of personalities and central points of failure. You look at the 51% attack that just happened with Ethereum Classic. I think we're going to start to see that start to happen with other scam coins in the future. That's going to be maybe the hot trend of 2019. I think all of them are just a big distraction. It's all of them are just a huge distraction. People trying to get rich quick. Focus on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the future. Bitcoin is the winner. It has been the winner. It's been the dominator. The flippening is not going to happen. Get it out of your head. Are there other technologies in crypto that are certainly interesting and useful? Absolutely. Smart contracts, I think, have a lot of potential. I think the technology is very early, and calling it Ethereum a global supercomputer is a joke and a sham when the network can't even handle 25,000 users using crypto kitties without going up in flames. But I think blockchain technology, smart contracts, some of that stuff has some really interesting potential going forward. But a lot of these protocols, a lot of these other shit coins are just, it's vaporware. It's people trying to get rich quick. It's technology that doesn't actually do what they say it does. And I'm not interested in any of that. The only thing that I'm interested in is processing payments without permission, censorship resistant payment processing, true decentralization. And also, Bitcoin has a first mover advantage. Like my grandma knows what Bitcoin is. The amount of press that Bitcoin has had over the last 10 years is incredible. So even if people maybe don't like Bitcoin or maybe don't know much about Bitcoin, I guarantee you, if you talk to any of your normal friends who aren't extremely online or in these crypto communities or whatever, they have heard of it and they likely know a little bit about it. And I think that's very powerful for market adoption and for, in our case, getting people to buy it and to exchange it with us in order to process payments. So that's why we went with Bitcoin over any of these other coins.
I tell you what's quite interesting. I think this bear market for Bitcoin and crypto generally has been great. I think it's really good. And one of the most interesting things is I've stopped checking the price. And once you stop checking the price, you focus on what's important. And also, I discovered Bitcoin because of the Silk Road. That was how I discovered it. Somebody introduced me to this website that was like Amazon, where I could buy this stuff that I normally had to go into a car park to buy, and I could just do it. And I was like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? So that was cool.
Right.
Not ironically, but so often people ask me what's my favorite interview I've ever done. My favorite interview was with Lynn Ulbricht, which is Ross Ulbricht's mother, right? So I've got to spend a lot of time researching and understanding the Silk Road. And the Silk Road for me was the perfect use case for Bitcoin. So we come full circle now. We come to Gab.com. And actually, in some ways, again, it's almost like this is the perfect relationship. It's like Bitcoin was designed for... It's not that it was designed for the site. It's not that it's just designed for the site. It's designed for the experience that you're going through.
Correct. Exactly. I think Gab is the prime example of why Bitcoin exists. And how powerful it truly is. And it's going to wake up a lot of people. I hope that, 5 or 10 years from now, that people are saying the same thing that you just said about the Silk Road. Well, I discovered Bitcoin because of Gab, because of what happened to Gab. That's part of my mission is I want to educate every new user that comes in the door. I want to educate them and say, well, you just joined the free speech social network. Now learn about free speech money. And that's going to be a very powerful thing. And I think if the Bitcoin community and the crypto community in general stops focusing on the drama and on the shit coins and on these protocols that don't actually work and don't actually do anything yet and have all these vague promises and all the drama that goes on. And if they instead focus on clear and concise marketing that is relatable to normal everyday people, messaging, usability, onboarding, user experience. If we focus on these things, well, then adoption is going to skyrocket. because, what's happening to Gab and other individuals is only going to happen to more people going forward. I think Gab is just the canary in the coal mine. Anytime you express some sort of wrong think or politically incorrect opinion, you're going to start to see people get, deplatformed and demonetized and barred from the traditional financial system, and that's going to wake more and more people up to Bitcoin.
Okay, so you're Bitcoin only now, right? Like you can't subscribe any other way?
Right now, yeah. That's the only way that we're processing payments right now. I believe through BTC Pay Server, we also have Litecoin activated, but I just exchanged that for Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay, so how has that been received by users? How's the process been of educating people? What's your kind of experience with Bitcoin? I mean, obviously, it's a lot easier for people to pay, with PayPal or a credit card, but you don't have that choice. So how's the experience been?
Oh, I have to correct myself too, because the other way that we're accepting payments right now is through checks and money orders. So people are literally sending us letters with checks to a PO box, which is, the snail mail old school way of processing payments. But they are doing it. So that was our first recourse before Bitcoin was accepting checks to a PO box. So we have checks and Bitcoin right now. And as far as our experience, it's been really good, actually. We have a lot of people that are getting very interested. And again, they're setting up, their wallets for the first time. They're thirsty for knowledge because they know they want to support Gab. And they know that this is one of the only ways to do so. So they have a very big incentive to want to learn what it is and how to get it and how to send it. And people in our community have that know about Bitcoin have been very helpful to others that don't know it. So a lot of it is very organic. It's not even us, necessarily educating, although we're doing our part, sending out emails like I'm sure the one that you read, etc. But a lot of it is just the community, helping each other out and people learning, and it's been really, really, really good. I think the other thing too that's really beneficial for us is like our hosting provider accepts payments in Bitcoin. Our domain registrar accepts payments in Bitcoin. Some of our contractors accept payments in Bitcoin. So it's been a pretty solid and easy transition for us in a lot of ways. And we're just excited to introduce people to free speech money. Not only to support us, which is important, obviously, but also to help them free themselves from the fiat slavery that so many people are stuck in right now, and maybe get them to start thinking about money in a different way, which is really compelling and very interesting. And it's something that we're going to keep doing going forward. Even, when we do inevitably probably get one bank out there in the world to process payments for us.
So it's quite interesting there that your message previously, like Gab.com, the message I constantly saw was about free speech. And now your message is kind of symbiotic with Bitcoin, right? It's free speech and free speech money. You're actually promoting Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have no choice, right? Like if we want to have revenue, if we want to process payments, we have to promote Bitcoin. And Bitcoin and Gab, it's a great love affair, free speech and free money. And by the way, money is free speech. Money is a form of free speech. They go hand in hand very, very well. And a lot of the ideals and the principles that many in the Bitcoin community have. Many people in the Bitcoin community are more libertarian, classical liberals, etc., who believe in things like individual liberty and freedom and free expression, etc. So there's a very symbiotic relationship there, and it ends up working out really, really well. We could have done, our own utility token. We could have done, our own ICO, all this nonsense, right? And trust me, we looked into that garbage, right? Because it was very interesting what was happening in 2017. Even researching this stuff, you're like, this is a scam and this is securities fraud. So we're not going to go down that path. I think 99% of those utility tokens don't actually have any utility that anybody really uses or cares about. And 99% of what they're trying to do can be solved by just using Bitcoin. So that's why we did it. We just went with Bitcoin, right? It's common sense.
But you obviously know your onions with Bitcoin.
Going to stir a lot of people up with this interview, I think.
Do you know what, actually? So the funny thing about my podcast is, despite it's called What Bitcoin Did, like when I started it, I was a multi-coiner. I was investing in everything. The What Bitcoin Did was more about the message of it all came from Bitcoin. And like I've gone on this journey of 65 episodes now, and the more I've learned, the more I've researched, the more obvious most of it's bullshit. So it's become more and more of a Bitcoin show. I think people are going to be really interested in what you've got to say. I'm very pleased with how much you know about Bitcoin, because it's clear, like it's like one of us. You're one of us. So I don't think you're gonna stir everyone up. You know, when I thought about doing this, I only had my like basic understanding of Gab. So you do your Google search, and it's like Pittsburgh shooting, far right, anti-Semitism, racist website. You obviously know your onions with Bitcoin, right? So
I've been in Bitcoin since probably 2012, 2013. You'll find articles from me on CoinDesk from 2013, where I went to a Subway about 45 minutes away from my house and used Bitcoin to buy a Subway sandwich. And that was the first real world transaction that I did back in 2013. I think now that transaction is worth like thousands of dollars, but I don't even care. You know, as I wrote back then, if we want Bitcoin to succeed, we have to use it for transactions. We have to exchange value. Otherwise, if everybody's just sitting on a store of value, then where does the value come from if nobody's actually using Bitcoin, right? So I don't regret, buying a $1,000 Subway sandwich back in 2013, because that transaction helped get Bitcoin to where it is today, in my mind.
Okay, but what I was going to come to is, obviously we've had the US government, they sanctioned 2 Bitcoin addresses related to Iran, which itself is kind of ridiculous for a number of reasons if you know about it. But there is still that threat there that the US government may want to sanction addresses or may want to taint certain Bitcoins. And we also have, the blockchain can be analyzed. So you probably have quite a strong view on fungibility and privacy. So like, give me your view on that. And also, do you have any interest in anything like Manero?
Yeah, I think Monero is interesting, right? But I think, I think there's obviously you want to prevent against too much government power, but also, you want the government to do their job and stop criminals. Like, I don't want Bitcoin to be used by child pornographers, right? I don't want Bitcoin to be used by terrorists, because then normal people, if that's the only use case, then normal people are not going to use Bitcoin. And I think they're actually more likely to use something like Manero over Bitcoin because of the public ledger, because of the quote unquote traceability of the blockchain. I think the criminals using Bitcoin is actually probably the dumbest possible thing that they can do when you really think about it. So something like Manero is interesting because privacy is crucially important for a lot of people, and it's actually very crucially important to free expression and to expressing yourselves via money. But I think something like Manero does have the potential to be abused by nefarious actors almost exclusively, right? So I think there's a danger there, but it's a give and a take, right? You kind of have to weigh your options. And I don't think there's any right answer, particularly because, pedophiles and criminals and terrorists also use cash, right? So, you can't shut down all of Monero just because there are some bad actors using it. And I think the privacy component is certainly important. But I don't know, this is a very, very dense topic, right? It's something that I'm kind of torn on in a lot of ways, because I understand the need and I highly respect privacy. But on the other hand, I also respect law enforcement, and I also, don't want to see criminals and terrorists thrive. So it's definitely a tricky subject to get into. But I don't know. I guess those are some of my thoughts on it.
Are you bringing Lightning payments to Gab?
We're working with several Lightning developers who are working on top of our API at the moment. We're very excited about the potential that the Lightning Network has for microtransactions. But I think as of today, it's still very early. They need to simplify the onboarding. They need to simplify the user experience. And there's a lot of cool projects out there that I think are working on this. The Joule, browser extension is one of them. There are a few other projects that are pretty interesting to us right now, but it's still so early that I don't think we're going to see anything anytime soon. Potentially later this year, maybe Q3, Q4, we'll launch, a small beta test, to the Bitcoin community exclusively so that they can test it on Gab. And then there's also some regulatory uncertainty and some legal uncertainty there. We don't want to be a money transmission business. So there's still some legal gray areas that, the lawyers are still debating over, and the regulators are still debating over, that we're waiting to kind of see what happens there. But we're certainly excited by it, and we're certainly talking to a lot of the more prominent engineers and thought leaders and builders in the Lightning space and on the protocol.
Okay, cool, man. All right, but before we finish up, a couple of closing questions. So what's the status of Gab right now? Like, what are you working on? What are the most important things happening for the project right now?
Yeah, so one of the most important things is the ability to process payments, right? So we're working on getting a fiat payment processor and also educating people on free speech money at the same time. And secondly, we're working on improving the onboarding experience to get people connected around interests. So even if you don't know anybody on Gab, chances are you share interests with, these anonymous profiles or these people from around the world. So getting people connected from their first experience is really one of our core focuses right now. And then just improving the user experience and the usability of the site overall, polishing things and bringing some familiar user experience type actions from other sites that people are familiar with, and there's lowering that learning curve to understanding how Gab works and simplifying things. So those are probably our top three priorities right now: is getting payment processing back up and running, educating people on free speech money, and simplifying the onboarding and the user experience, which ironically are all things that kind of go hand in hand, and that I would argue the Bitcoin community needs to be doing at large as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. And final question, how do people stay in touch? Like, who do you want to hear from? What should people be doing, like, to connect with Gab?
Yeah, you could follow me. I'm at A. One of the benefits of starting the website is you get single letter username. So I'm at A on Gab. You can follow at Gab on Gab, which is our official account there, and then at Get on Gab on Twitter. Those are probably the three best ways to stay in touch with what we're doing.
And if there's any people in Bitcoin who want to get involved, who can support you in any way, is there anything specifically you're looking for?
Yeah, we're looking to bring in and broaden our community, right? So I think a lot of our community is very political in nature. That's starting to change. We're starting to see a lot more people get into things like, gardening and crafts and arts, and these different smaller communities are starting to be built out. But, we'd love to have the crypto community and the Bitcoin community at large join the site. We do have a couple of Bitcoin groups that have already started forming with a couple hundred members. So, the bigger the site can get and the more diverse it can get in terms of different interests and ideas that are being talked about and discussed, the better for the site. And, obviously, if you guys want to stay in touch, even test out, our BTC Pay, integration to see how we did it. And maybe you want to support us and throw us a couple of Satoshis. That would be excellent.
All right, man. Well, listen, this was fantastic. I've learned a lot from it. I think people will really enjoy this and probably be surprised about a lot of what you say, because I think most of the stuff that you find out about Gab, light touch, is probably very different from what you'll learn from this interview. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for going with some of my basic questions, and I hope we'll get to do this again in the future.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what did you make of that? What do you think of what Andrew has to say? Are these websites right to censor people? Should we be censoring hate speech? What is hate speech? Where do we draw the line? What should and shouldn't be allowed? Do you understand the issues I'm having with this? Trying to understand where to draw the line, because I've definitely found tasteless content on every single platform. It's definitely a hot topic. It's definitely a range of issues. and there's definitely a range of opinions, and I really do want to hear back from you. I think I'm going to pursue this a little more, and I might speak to a couple of more people in this area, so it would be great to hear back from you. It would be great to hear some points of view that people have about this. Please do reach out to me on Twitter. Please do feel free to email me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I do want to hear from you on this. And also, just a big thank you to everyone who supports the show. For those who do anything, whether you leave me a review on iTunes or you just drop me an email to say thank you. I mean, I must get like 5 emails a week, and every single one I read and every single one I'm grateful for. But if you do want to support the show and you haven't done so yet, I talk about this every week, but it's really important. These are the things that help me keep the show going. So firstly, you can just listen to the sponsors. Don't just skip past them. The sponsors pay for this to happen. If I don't have sponsors, I can't afford to do the show, and then I'll end up homeless. So definitely listen to the adverts if you don't want me to end up living on the street. You can also become a patron. I've got 73 now. I still can't believe this. The generosity here is utterly amazing. I do, by the way, share out some of that back with other accounts. I'll list that on my transparency report next month. I share out some of what I receive with other Patreon accounts. But if you do want to receive the show without any adverts, you can pay $5 a month. If you head over to patreon.com/whatbitcoindid, you can do that there. If you don't want to use Patreon, but you want to subscribe, and maybe you just want to use crypto, then feel free to email me. I can give you an address to send it to and add you to the distribution list. You get the show early without ads each week. I have a crypto tip jar, which is on my website. You can head over to there. I accept everything apart from Ripple coin. You can become a show sponsor. If you're interested in that, please head over to hello@whatbitcoindid.com. My downloads are growing again. It looks like January might be a record month, so fingers crossed, perhaps it will. I'll share that out with my income report. You can leave a review on iTunes, and you can also click on the subscribe button, and you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Medium, I'm at whatbitcoindid on everything, but my personal Twitter is at Peter McCormack. DMs are open. Feel free to reach out to me as long as you don't want me to shield some nonsense. You can check out my website, which is www.whatbitcoindid.com, and you can also sign up to my newsletter there, and you can share this show out with your friends and family. Okay, I've got a couple of great interviews coming next week. Firstly, I have Zuko from Zcash. Definitely trying to get my head around what Zcash is, so that's quite an interesting one there. And today I'm hoping to record an interview which will be out next Friday. I don't want to tell you who it is because it might not happen, but if it does, it's definitely going to be a cool one. Okay, I hope you all have a great weekend. If you want to reach out to me again, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com.